Officer Daniel Rourke had been on duty for almost 10 hours, and the long shift was wearing on him. The evening had started calmly. It had slowly turned into one of those nights where every small thing seemed to get under his skin. He had handled 2 noise complaints, a minor fender bender, and a call about a lost dog that somehow turned into a 30-minute argument between neighbors. By the time the clock passed 11 p.m., Daniel felt the tension sitting in his shoulders like a heavy weight. The highway he was patrolling was usually quiet at. Tower. Streetlights were spaced far apart, leaving long stretches of darkness between soft pools of yellow light. The hum of the patrol car's engine was the only sound keeping him company. Daniel tried to focus, but fatigue mixed with irritation made his thoughts dull and impatient. He kept reminding himself that he only had a couple of hours left before the shift changed. Just a little longer, he told himself. Just make it through the night. As he drove past a gentle curve in the road, he noticed a black SUV in the distance. It drifted slightly toward the right side of the lane before correcting itself. Daniel narrowed his eyes. The movement wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable enough to catch his attention. Maybe the driver was tired, maybe distracted, or maybe something else. Great, Daniel muttered under his breath. Not tonight. Still, he flicked on his turn signal and pulled behind the SUV, watching it closely. The vehicle drifted again, only for a second, but enough to convince him to act. He tapped the switch, and the red and blue lights lit up the quiet road. The SUV slowed almost immediately and pulled to the shoulder. Daniel took a steady breath, trying to control the frustration building inside him. Traffic stops were simple, routine, usually quick. But tonight, everything felt heavier than it should. He stepped out of his cruiser, the cool night air brushing against his face. The sound of crickets buzzed quietly beyond the road. Approaching the driver's side window, he kept his flashlight angled downward, not wanting to blind the person inside. The window rolled down smoothly, and the driver looked out at him. He appeared calm, maybe in his late 40s or early 50s. Wearing simple clothes, a plain shirt, jacket, nothing unusual. His hands were resting visibly on the steering wheel. A sign Daniel immediately recognized as respectful cooperation. "Good evening, officer," the man said in a steady, even tone. "Is everything all right?" Daniel cleared his throat. "You were drifting in your lane a couple of times. Everything okay with you tonight?" "Yes, I'm fine," the man replied. "Just a long day. I may have been a little tired. I apologize if I crossed the line a bit." His calmness didn't ease Daniel's frustration the way it normally would. Instead, for reasons he couldn't quite explain, exhaustion, irritability, or the simple frustration of the night, it felt like the man wasn't taking things seriously enough. "License and registration," Daniel said, his voice firmer than necessary, of course. The man moved slowly and carefully, reaching into his pocket and then the glove compartment. He handed over the documents without hesitation. His motions were deliberate, polite, almost too composed. Daniel examined the license. The man's address was local. No previous issues, no warnings or suspensions. Everything looked normal. He shined his flashlight inside the SUV. The interior was clean, almost spotless. No smell of alcohol. No signs of anything suspicious. "Where are you coming from?" Daniel asked. "A work meeting," the man answered. It ran later than expected, and why the drifting? Daniel pressed. The man paused before answering, not defensively, but thoughtfully. "Just tired, officer. It's been a long week." Daniel nodded, but didn't feel satisfied. Something in him was tight, restless. It wasn't the man's behavior, it was his own nerves refusing to settle. He stepped back slightly. "Please step out of the vehicle." The man blinked, surprised but not argumentative. "Is there a problem?" "I just want to make sure you're okay to drive," Daniel said. He's trying to sound neutral. The man nodded and opened the door, stepping out slowly. He stood straight, hands at his sides. There was nothing threatening about him. His posture was respectful, almost patient. "Do you feel unsteady? Any medical issues I should know about?" Daniel asked. "No, sir," the man replied. "I'm fine. Just tired." Daniel studied him carefully, the steady breathing, relaxed shoulders, the lack of any signs of impairment. Everything pointed to an ordinary, worn-out person heading home after a long day. But Daniel's irritation pushed him to keep digging. "Let's walk to the front of your vehicle," he said. The man followed without complaint. They stood under the faint glow of a streetlight. Daniel asked a few basic questions, checking the man's coordination and responses. Everything was normal. Perfectly normal, yet Daniel felt uneasy. His own emotions were clouding his judgment, and he didn't realize it. Instead of accepting the man's cooperation, he felt himself getting more tense. He wanted control of the situation, wanted clarity, wanted something to justify why he felt so on edge. "Sir," the man said gently, sensing the rising tension, "if you'd like, I can call someone to pick me up. I don't want to cause trouble. I understand you're just doing your job." The calmness in the man's voice only made Daniel feel more defensive, though he didn't understand why. It was as if the man's politeness felt too perfect, too controlled, like he was hiding something. "That won't be necessary," Daniel said sharply. "Just wait here," he radioed the station, asking for routine checks. Everything came back clean. No warrants. No red flags. Nothing to justify further escalation. Still, Daniel felt something wasn't adding up, though the problem truly sat within himself. When he returned to the man, his tone was clipped. "I need you to stay where you are while I complete the report." The man nodded, clasping his hands patiently in front of him. "Take your time, officer." It's a simple phrase, irritated Daniel more than it should have. It felt like the man was too calm, too polite, as if he were quietly judging Daniel for being overly tense. A gust of wind blew across the road, brushing against them. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of a passing truck somewhere far off. "Sir," Daniel said abruptly, "I need you to turn around." The man looked at him, confused. "Turn around? May I ask why?" Daniel felt frustration flare again. "Because I'm telling you to. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The man hesitated only a moment, not out of disobedience, but out of confusion. "Officer, I'm cooperating. I haven't done anything wrong. Can we talk about this?" "I don't want an argument," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice controlled. "Just do as I ask." The man slowly turned, hands loosely behind him. "I really don't want any trouble," he said softly. "I know," Daniel replied, though his tone didn't match the words. He reached for the cuffs, feeling the familiar weight in his hands. His heart was beating faster than the moment deserved. He didn't fully understand why he was taking this step, and he certainly didn't recognize how unnecessary it was. But the mix of exhaustion, stress, and misplaced confidence pushed him forward. The man didn't resist. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He simply allowed Daniel to place the cuffs around his wrists. As the metal clicked shut, the man sighed, not dramatically, not angrily, just a quiet exhale. Like someone who had hoped the situation would go differently, Daniel guided him toward the patrol car. The man walked calmly, not stumbling, not objecting. He simply followed instructions, even though confusion lingered in his expression. "Officer," the man said gently as Daniel opened the back door of the cruiser, "I truly don't understand what's happening, but I promise you I'm not trying to cause any issues." Daniel avoided eye contact. "We'll sort it out at the station?" The man nodded once. "All right." Daniel helped him into the car and shut the door. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the tinted window, where the man's shadow sat still and calm. The night air was quiet again, but inside Daniel's chest, a storm churned. Something felt wrong about the whole situation, yet he couldn't bring himself to admit it. He walked back to the driver's side, took a deep breath, and got into the car. As he started the engine, a small thought tugged at the back of his mind. Was this really necessary? But the thought was quickly buried under the weight of pride in the long, tiring night. The patrol car pulled away from the shoulder, carrying both men toward a station where the truth would slowly, unexpectedly unfold. The ride to the station was quiet. Officer Daniel Rourke kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wasn't calm. Every few seconds, he glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a faint outline of the man sitting in the back seat. The man didn't move or speak. He simply sat there with his hands cuffed, staring out the window as the streetlights passed over his face. There was no anger in his expression, no frustration. Just a quiet, steady patience that somehow made Daniel feel even more unsettled. He tried to shake the feeling off. He told himself he was doing his job following protocol, staying cautious, making sure the roads were safe. That was his responsibility. But even as he repeated those thoughts, a part of him whispered that he had taken things too far. The station was only 10 minutes away, but the drive felt longer. The roads were mostly empty, and the town around them seemed to be sleeping. The glow of shop signs had dimmed, and the only life came from the occasional diner or gas station still open at this hour. When Daniel finally pulled into the station lot, he hesitated before turning off the engine. He sat still for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the weight of the night pressing on him. He stepped out and opened the back door. The man looked up, offering a small, polite nod. "Please watch your step," Daniel said, trying to sound steady. "Of course," the man replied softly. Daniel guided him toward the entrance. The station was quiet, with only a couple of officers working the late shift. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on the gray floors. As they walked in, the desk sergeant looked up from his paperwork. He was an older officer, calm and experienced, someone who had seen enough of everything to stay level-headed, no matter the time of night. "Another one?" the sergeant said, raising an eyebrow. "Possible impaired driving," Daniel replied. The sergeant gave the man a quick look, studying his posture, his eyes. The way he stood with quiet dignity, despite the cuffs on his wrists, doesn't look impaired. The sergeant said under his breath. Daniel felt a flicker of irritation. He was drifting on the road, he insisted. Lots of folks drift when they're tired. The sergeant replied calmly. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't want to explain himself again, not when he wasn't fully sure of his own reasoning. "Bring him to the bench," the sergeant said. Motioning to the waiting area, Daniel led the man over, guiding him gently by the arm. He sat him down, then stepped back, trying not to show his nerves. The sergeant came around the desk, looking at the man with a more attentive eye. "Sir," he asked politely, "are you feeling unwell? Any medical issues? Anything we should know about?" The man shook his head. "No, sir. I'm fine. I'm not upset. I just want to make sure everything is handled properly." There was something about the way he spoke, careful, measured, almost practiced, that caught the sergeant's attention. Not suspiciously, but curiously. The sergeant turned to Daniel. "Did he give you any ID?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, it's in the report folder." He walked over to the desk, opened the folder, and pulled out the man's wallet and documents. He handed them to the sergeant. The sergeant examined the driver's license first. Everything looked normal. Local address, clean record. Then he found a second card tucked behind the license. It wasn't a regular ID. It wasn't even something you would see every day. The sergeant's eyes narrowed slightly as he studied it. The card looked official, very official, but not one that belonged to the police department. "What is this?" the sergeant murmured. Daniel stepped closer. "I saw it earlier but didn't recognize it." Sergeant didn't answer immediately. His expression shifted from curiosity to something more serious. He pressed his lips together, thinking. Then he looked at the man. "Sir, may I ask what's your occupation?" The man hesitated, then answered politely. "I'd prefer if someone in your department contacted the number on that card. They can explain things better than I can." The sergeant studied him again. "Is there a reason you can't tell us yourself?" "There is," the man said gently. "But I assure you, it isn't to cause trouble. I simply follow protocol." The word protocol made the sergeant stiffen slightly. He exchanged a look with Daniel, a look that said, "This might be bigger than it seems." "All right," the sergeant said calmly. "We'll make the call." He walked back to the desk and picked up the phone. Daniel watched as he dialed the number on the card. After only a couple of rings, someone answered. The sergeant straightened a little. "Yes, this is Officer Bennett at the local station. We have someone here who asked us to call this number. Card identification reads." He paused, listening. Then his eyes widened just slightly. Yes, he's here." Another pause. "Understood." The sergeant hung up and took a slow breath. Daniel's stomach tightened. What did they say? The sergeant didn't answer immediately. He walked back over to the man and spoke with a tone that was noticeably more respectful. Sir, someone is on their way. They should be here shortly. Thank you, the man replied kindly. Daniel felt confusion rising inside him. Who's coming? He asked. The sergeant gave him a quiet, warning look. Just wait. Those words did nothing to calm Daniel's nerves. The room fell silent again, except for the low hum of lights and distant chatter from officers down the hallway. The man on the bench sat calmly, hands still cuffed, his breathing even. He did not complain. He did not question. He simply waited. Daniel paced a little, feeling restless. You're acting like he's important, he said quietly to the sergeant. The sergeant glanced at him. Maybe he is, but that doesn't make sense. He was drifting in his lane. That's all? People drift, the sergeant said. You don't cuff a person for that unless something's off. Daniel stiffened. Are you saying I messed up? The sergeant didn't answer. He didn't need to. Minutes passed slowly. Daniel felt every second stretch. He kept glancing at the entrance, waiting for someone. He didn't even know who. The man on the bench remained calm, as if this was nothing more than an inconvenience. Not anger. Not fear. Just patience. Finally, the sound of tires crunching over gravel came from outside. A vehicle pulled up. Not a regular car. Not a police vehicle either. Daniel felt a chill move down his spine. The front doors of the station opened, and two people stepped inside. They weren't dressed like police officers. Their posture, presence, and the way they carried themselves were different, disciplined, confident. Serious, they both scanned the room briefly before one of them nodded toward the man sitting on the bench. The sergeant immediately straightened. He's right here. Daniel was frozen in place. The two newcomers walked over to the man. One of them spoke respectfully. Double quotes, sir. We apologize for the delay. Are you all right? I'm fine, the man replied with a small nod. Thank you for coming. Daniel felt his heart drop. Who were these people? Why were they speaking to him like that, like he outranked them? One of the newcomers turned to the sergeant. Please remove the cuffs. The sergeant nodded without hesitation. He motioned to Daniel. Unlock him. Daniel's hands felt stiff as he stepped forward. He reached down and unlocked the cuffs, trying not to show how nervous he felt. The man rubbed his wrists gently. Thank you. The newcomer looked at Daniel with a calm but firm expression. We'll discuss this soon. Daniel swallowed hard. The sergeant stepped closer, lowering his voice. You might want to brace yourself. This isn't just anyone. Daniel felt the weight of those words settle on him slowly. The man stood up, stretching lightly as if the cuffs hadn't bothered him much. One of the newcomers spoke again, this time addressing Daniel directly. We'll need a full report, and someone will be contacting your department shortly. Daniel nodded. Unable to speak, the man gave Daniel a gentle look, not angry, not resentful, just quietly thoughtful. I hope this can be handled properly, he said. I understand long nights can be difficult. Daniel felt the words hit deeper than they should have. There was no blame in them, no harshness, just understanding, and somehow that made it worse. The man walked toward the door with the two newcomers at his side. Before leaving, he paused and glanced back. Take care, he said softly. Then he stepped outside. Disappearing into the night, Daniel stood frozen, feeling a mix of confusion, embarrassment, and dread tightening in his chest. The sergeant finally broke the silence. Daniel, you need to talk to the captain. Now. Daniel nodded slowly, feeling the reality settle in. Whatever had just happened, it was only the beginning. The station felt different the moment the man left with the two officials. It was the same building, the same bright lights, the same quiet hallways, yet the air felt heavier. Officer Daniel Rourke stood in the middle of the room, staring at the door long after it had closed. His heart was beating fast, and his thoughts were a mess. He couldn't stop replaying the night in his mind, the drifting SUV, the calm driver, the handcuffs clicking shut, The desk sergeant placed the mysterious card on the table. It looked harmless enough, but the way he stared at it made Daniel nervous. "Daniel," the sergeant said quietly, "you need to take this seriously." "I know," Daniel replied, though his voice was small. "No, I mean really seriously." Sergeant looked him straight in the eye. "That man wasn't just anybody." Daniel swallowed. "So who was he?" The sergeant didn't answer immediately. He simply motioned with his head. "Come with me." They walked through the hallway toward the captain's office. Every step made Daniel's chest feel tighter. He didn't like being summoned to the captain's office at any hour, but especially not past midnight. The sergeant knocked lightly and pushed the door open. The captain sat behind his desk, reading something on a tablet. When he looked up, his expression wasn't angry, but it wasn't friendly either. It was the kind of expression that made Daniel wish he could turn back time and rethink every decision he had made that night. "Sit down." "Daniel," the captain said. His hands were stiff. His legs felt heavy. The captain tapped the screen on his tablet, then looked up again. "Do you know who you arrested tonight?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sir. I thought he was just a tired driver." The captain leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. "That man is one of the highest-ranking officers in our country's military." Daniel felt the words hit him like a sudden wave. "What?" "He wasn't just someone with a fancy ID," the captain continued. "He oversees major operations. He works directly with people far above our level. He carries responsibilities that we can barely imagine." "And you put handcuffs on him?" Daniel's stomach twisted. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. "What were you thinking?" the captain asked, not accusingly, but genuinely. Daniel forced himself to speak. "I thought he was swerving. I thought he might be tired or hiding something." "And did he resist you at any point?" The captain pressed. "No," Daniel admitted. "He was calm the whole time? Then why did you cuff him?" Daniel lowered his eyes. The truth sounded so weak in his own mind. I don't know. I was tired. It had been a long night. Maybe I read him wrong. I guess I overreacted." "Overreacted?" The captain sighed. "Daniel, this could become a major issue." The sergeant stood quietly near the doorway, arms crossed, his expression serious. "We need to file an incident report," the captain said. "And it needs to be honest. Every detail. No excuses." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. For now," the captain continued, "you're on administrative leave until this is sorted out." The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. "Leave, sir? This is procedure. And it's necessary," the captain said firmly. "This situation is out of our hands. Higher authorities are already aware." Daniel looked down at his hands, feeling the weight of everything he'd done. He had wanted control on that dark highway. Instead, he had lost control of his own judgment. "Go home," the captain said quietly. "We'll call you when we know more." Daniel stood up slowly. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. As he walked out of the office, every step felt heavier. The sergeant followed him into the hallway. "Daniel," he said gently, "I know you didn't mean harm, but this is serious." "I know," Daniel whispered. "Go home. Get some rest." Daniel nodded. He walked through the empty station, grabbed his jacket from the locker room, and stepped outside. The night air was colder now, sharp enough to make him shiver. He drove home with his thoughts swirling. The road blurred past him as he replayed every moment. The man's calm voice, his polite answers. The moment the cuffs clicked, the silence in the station when those officials arrived. By the time Daniel reached his small apartment, he felt drained. He dropped his jacket on the couch and sat for a long time, staring at the floor. He knew he had made mistakes before, but not like this. Not something that could ripple far beyond one night. He fell asleep only after the sun began to rise. The next day moved slowly. Daniel kept checking his phone even though he knew nobody would call this early. He tried to distract himself by cleaning, making coffee, walking around the apartment. But his mind refused to quiet down. Later that afternoon, his phone finally rang. He snatched it up immediately. "Hello?" "Daniel, It's the captain. I need you to come in. Daniel's stomach tightened. Something wrong? Just come, the captain said, and be ready to answer questions. Daniel got dressed quickly and drove to the station. This time, his steps through the hallway felt uncertain, almost shaky. When he reached the captain's office, he saw two unfamiliar men waiting inside. They wore plain clothing, but their posture made it clear they weren't ordinary visitors. They stood with the same straight, disciplined stance as the officials who had come the previous night. Daniel, the captain said quietly, "These gentlemen are here to speak with you." The older of the two men nodded politely. "Officer Rourke, we'd like to ask you some questions about last night." Daniel swallowed hard. "Of course, please sit," the man said. Daniel sat down. The men did not raise their voices or show anger. They were calm, maybe to calm end that made him more nervous. "We understand the person you detained did not resist," the man said. "That's right," Daniel replied. He complied fully. "Yes, and he did not raise his voice or act aggressively?" "No," Daniel said. "Not at all." The man nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already knew. "Why did you choose to place him in handcuffs?" Daniel hesitated. He wanted to give a clean, simple answer, but the truth wasn't clean. It wasn't even logical, I thought. Maybe he was hiding something, or trying to stay calm, and I was tired. I misread the situation. The men exchanged a glance. "Officer," the second man said gently, "the individual you arrested is not only highly respected, but he carries responsibilities that affect many people. He is known for his calm personality. He follows protocol strictly. He trusted you to handle the situation correctly." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean disrespect. We understand," the man said. "Mistakes happen. What matters now is how you handle them." Daniel nodded. "I'll do whatever is needed. It will be a formal review," the man continued. "But the individual you detained did not request punishment. He simply asked that your department handle it with fairness." Daniel blinked. He didn't want to press anything. "No," the man said. "He is not interested in harming your career. He believes in handling things internally, with guidance, rather than punishment." Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. The man he had wrongfully cuffed was choosing not to push for consequences. One of the men stood. "There is a good chance he may speak with you personally. For now, we ask that you reflect on what led to your decision." Daniel nodded. "I will." The men thanked the captain, then left as quietly as they had arrived. The captain turned to Daniel. "You're lucky, you know." "I know," Daniel said softly. "I really do." "Go home," the captain said. "You're still on leave until we get the final word." Daniel left the station feeling drained again. But this time, there was something else mixed in with the exhaustions. Something like hope. 3 days passed. Daniel tried to stay busy, but his mind kept returning to the same questions. Why had he acted that way? Why had he felt the need to take control of a situation that wasn't out of control to begin with? And why had the man shown him kindness instead of anger? On the 4th day, Daniel got a call from the captain. "He wants to meet you." Daniel's breath caught. "Who you know who?" the captain said. "Be here in 30 minutes." Daniel hung up and grabbed his keys. When he arrived at the station, the man was already there, standing in the hallway with the same calm presence he'd had that night. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He didn't look intimidating. He looked like someone who carried quiet strength without needing to show it. He turned when Daniel approached. Their eyes met. "Thank you for coming," the man said politely. Daniel nodded. Unable to find his voice? "Walk with me," the man said. They stepped outside into the sunlight. The air was cool and clear. "I know what happened that night wasn't easy for you," the man said. "Long shifts can push people to their limits. I understand that." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm truly sorry. I should have handled it differently." The man smiled gently. "We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." Daniel felt a knot loosen in his chest. "There is a training program," the man continued, "designed to help officers work under pressure. It teaches how to lead with calmness, how to make decisions without letting stress take over. I teach the course sometimes. I would like you to attend." Daniel blinked, surprised. He had expected anger, disappointment, maybe a warning, but an offer. "Why me?" Daniel asked quietly. "Because you care," the man said. "If you didn't, the situation wouldn't weigh on you so heavily." Daniel looked away, emotion catching in his throat. "I'm not here to punish you," the man said. "I want to help you be the best version of yourself, for your sake and for the people you serve." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'll go. Thank you." The man extended his hand. Daniel shook it, and for the first time in days, he felt like he could breathe again. The night felt heavier than usual, as if the air itself carried the weight of everything that had gone wrong in the last few days. The officer sat alone in his small apartment, surrounded by silence that only made his thoughts louder. He kept replaying the moment when he realized who the man he arrested really was. It shocked him then, and it still shocked him now. He had crossed a line without thinking, without pausing long enough to question his own behavior. And now, the truth was sitting on his shoulders like a weight he couldn't shake off. He wanted to believe he was a good person, someone who chose this job for the right reasons. But the more he thought about his actions, the more he felt like he had failed not only the general, but also himself. That night he barely slept. He turned from side to side, trying to find a moment of peace. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the general's calm face. The way the man had looked at him, not with anger, not with fear, but with disappointment. That look hurt more than anything else. By the time the sun rose, the officer felt drained. He got ready for work slowly, unsure of how the day would unfold. He didn't know if he would face discipline, if he would be called into an office, or if the general had already filed a report. All he knew was that he couldn't run from whatever was coming at the station. Everything felt normal on the surface, but he sensed a tension in the air, as if news of the incident had traveled further than he realized. People greeted him the same way as usual, but something in their eyes made him feel exposed. Maybe he was imagining it, or maybe they knew. Either way, he kept his head down and went straight to his desk. Before he could even sit, he heard someone call his name. It was his supervisor, standing a few feet away, with a serious expression. "Come with me," the supervisor said. His heart dropped. He followed in silence, his footsteps heavy. They walked down a hallway he had never really paid attention to before, a hallway that suddenly felt too long. When they reached a small room at the end, the supervisor opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, the general was waiting. The officer froze in the doorway. He didn't expect this. He thought the general would be somewhere far away, too busy to deal with him personally. But here he was, sitting calmly in a chair, looking as composed as ever. "Have a seat," the general said. The officer sat down, feeling his heartbeat thudding in his ears. He avoided eye contact at first, but eventually forced himself to look up. The general spoke in a steady voice. Not harsh, not unkind. "You know why we are here?" It wasn't a question. It was a fact. The officer nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." His voice sounded small. The general leaned back slightly, studying him, not in a threatening way, but in a thoughtful one. "I want to understand what happened that night. I want to hear it from you directly." His words were simple, but they carried weight. The officer swallowed hard. He felt his throat tighten, but he knew he had to speak. "I lost my temper," he began quietly. "I didn't handle the situation the way I should have. I acted on frustration instead of training. I didn't treat you with respect, and I didn't look closely enough at what was really happening. I was wrong." The words felt heavy coming out, but once they were spoken, felt a strange relief. The general listened carefully, not interrupting. When the officer finished, he nodded once, slow and thoughtful. "Do you know the difference between a mistake and a pattern?" the general asked. The officer shook his head slightly. "A mistake," the general said, "is something you recognize, take responsibility for, and learn from. A pattern is something you repeat because you refuse to face the truth." He paused. "So which one is this?" The officer knew the answer immediately. "A mistake, sir. I don't want it to be a pattern. I want to learn from this. I want to do better. The general seemed to study him again, searching for something in his expression. After a moment, he spoke. Everyone has moments when they fall short of who they want to be. What matters is what you do afterward. He leaned forward slightly. I came here today not to punish you, but to see who you really are, to see if you understand the weight of your actions. The officer felt a wave of emotion rising in his chest. He nodded, feeling humbled. The general continued. I'm not filing a complaint. I'm not asking for disciplinary action, but I do expect something from you. His tone grew firm, but still calm. You need to rebuild the trust you've damaged, not just with me, but with yourself. The words felt like both a second chance and a responsibility. Yes, sir, the officer said softly. The supervisor, who had stayed silent until now, stepped closer. You're being given an opportunity, he said. Don't waste it. The officer nodded again. He felt gratitude, guilt, and determination all at once. The meeting ended shortly after, and as the officer walked out, he felt a strange mix of relief and pressure. The situation wasn't over. If anything, this might be the beginning of something bigger. He had been given a second chance, but now he had to prove he deserved it. Later that day, the officer sat in his patrol car during his break, staring out the windshield. He thought about the general's words about mistakes and patterns. He realized that he had been carrying frustration inside him for a long time, letting it build up quietly until it finally exploded. It wasn't just about the general. It was about everything he had kept inside. All the stress, all the pressure. All the moments when he felt invisible or overwhelmed. He knew he needed help. Not because he was weak, but because he wanted to be stronger. He wanted to be the kind of person who could face difficult moments with calm and clarity, not anger. So he made a decision. After his shift, he went to speak with a counselor the department recommended. He didn't want to hide anymore. He wanted to understand himself better. The counselor listened patiently as he truly talked. For the first time in a long time. He opened up about the stress of the job, the long hours, the constant pressure to stay alert, the fear of making mistakes, and the guilt he felt when he failed. He spoke about the general, about the moment everything snapped, about how he felt afterward. The counselor didn't judge him. Instead, they helped him untangle the feelings he had ignored for too long. They talked about stress management, grounding techniques, and ways to stay calm during high-pressure moments. For the first time in a while, the officer felt hopeful. In the days that followed, he worked harder. He paid more attention. He took a breath before reacting. His coworkers noticed the small changes in him, even if they didn't say anything. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying. He could feel himself becoming more patient, more aware. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. The general returned to the station not because of a problem, but because he wanted to speak with the officer again. When the officer saw him, he felt nervous, but the general gave a small, calm smile. Walk with me, the general said. They stepped outside where the sunlight was soft and warm. They walked side by side in silence for a moment before the general spoke. I came here today because I wanted to see how you were doing, he said. I heard from your supervisor that you've been making changes, the officer nodded. I'm trying, sir. I can see that, the general replied. They continued walking slowly. Then the general said something the officer didn't expect. No, he said, leadership isn't about never making mistakes. It's about being honest with yourself. It's about growing. He glanced at the officer. I think you understand that now. The officer felt a quiet pride grow inside him. The general paused, then added, There's something I want to ask of you, and it's important. The officer looked at him, curious and slightly nervous. The general took a gentle breath. But before I ask, he said, I need to know you're ready for it. The officer's heart beat faster. Whatever the general was about to say, it sounded like something that would change everything, and he wasn't sure if he was prepared for it. But he knew one thing for certain. He wanted to be ready. The general finally turned to him, steady and calm, about to reveal what he had in mind, and that moment standing in the warm light. Waiting felt like the beginning of another turning point, Turning point that would shape everything that came next. The officer stood beside the general, the warm afternoon light stretching across the parking lot. Even though the moment felt calm, something in the general's voice told him that what came next would matter. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. After everything that had happened, after every mistake and every step forward, he wanted to prove he was ready. The general looked at him with thoughtful eyes. "I've watched how you've handled yourself these past days," he said. "Most people try to hide from their mistakes. You chose to face yours. That is rare." His tone wasn't flattering. It was sincere. The officer felt a quiet warmth in his chest. He didn't want praise. He just wanted to be better, but hearing those words meant more than he expected. They walked a few more steps. The general rested his hand on the back of it. "What I'm about to ask isn't simple," he continued. "It will require patience, discipline, and humility. But it is something I believe you can handle if you choose to." The officer felt his heartbeat rise. "I'm listening, sir." The general turned toward him fully. "The Army is starting a new program," he said. "It's a training exchange. Officers from different fields work together to learn from each other. Police, military, emergency responders. It's designed to help reduce misunderstandings on the field and improve judgment in high-pressure moments."
Oh.
The officer listened closely. It sounded important, bigger than anything he had ever been part of. "I want you to join it," the general said. For a moment, the officer thought he heard wrong. "Me?" he asked quietly. The general replied. I believe you can learn a great deal from it, and I believe others can learn from your experience as well. It's an opportunity to grow, just as an officer, but as a person." The officer felt stunned. He had expected punishment at one point. He had expected disappointment. But this felt like trust. Real trust. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Because you're changing," the general said simply. "And people who are willing to change are the ones who can make the biggest difference." The officer felt those words settle deep inside him. He thought about the long nights when he questioned everything he had done, the conversations with the counselor, the effort he put into slowing down, breathing, thinking before reacting. None of it came easy. But now, standing here, he realized that all of it mattered. He nodded slowly. "If you think I can handle it, then I'll do it." The general gave a small, approving nod. "Good, that's what I hoped you would say." They talked a while longer. The general explained what the program would involve: workshops, field training, joint exercises with Army personnel. It wouldn't be easy. It would challenge him, push him, test the limits of his patience and resilience. But instead of feeling afraid, he felt something different. He felt ready. The first day of the program arrived sooner than he expected. He stood in a large training hall, surrounded by people from different backgrounds: police officers, soldiers, medics, firefighters. They all looked focused, serious, determined. The officer felt out of place at first. He wondered if they knew why he had been chosen. He wondered if they judged him. But he reminded himself of what the general said. This was an opportunity to grow. The instructors began with basic introductions, explaining the purpose of the program. They talked about leadership, emotional control, communication, and decision-making. The officer listened closely, taking notes, absorbing everything. As days turned into weeks, the training grew more challenging. They ran drills that pushed them physically. They practiced conflict escalation techniques. They completed team exercises that required trust in one exercise. They were paired with someone from a different field. The officer was paired with a young medic, known for staying calm in emergencies. During a scenario where they had to respond to a simulated crisis, the officer felt himself beginning to tense up. His instinct was to rush, to act quickly, to take control. But then he remembered the counselor's words and the breathing techniques he had learned. He slowed down, observed, communicated, and the exercise went smoother than he expected. After it was over, the medic smiled at him. "You handled that well," she said. The officer felt a genuine sense of pride. Not because he was perfect, but because he was better than before. Over time, he began to notice that others respected him not because of his rank or experience, but because of how he carried himself. He listened more. He spoke with purpose. He owned his mistakes. And little by little, he felt himself transforming. One afternoon, during a break, the general visited the training center. When he saw the officer, he smiled. Not a big smile, but a small, approving one. "How's the program going?" the general asked. "Hard," the officer admitted with a slight laugh, "but good." "Really good," the general nodded. "Growth usually feels that way." They walked together across the training field. The officer felt comfortable around him, now still respectful. Still aware of the general's authority, but no longer afraid. "There's something important I've learned here," the officer said after a moment. "I used to think being strong meant never showing weakness. Now I realize it's the opposite. Strength is being honest about what you need to fix." The general looked at him with approval. "That's a lesson many people never learn," he said. The officer took a deep breath. "Thank you for giving me a chance to fix it. You earned that chance," the general replied. Months passed, and the officer completed the program with a renewed sense of purpose. At the graduation ceremony, he stood among the other participants, feeling a quiet pride in what he had achieved. He wasn't the same person who had made that terrible mistake. He was stronger, calmer, more aware. When the ceremony ended, the general approached him. He extended his hand. "You've come a long way," he said. The officer shook his hand firmly. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance." The general shook his head gently. "I gave you direction. You did the work." The officer felt a rush of gratitude. "What comes next?" he asked. The general smiled faintly. "What comes next is up to you. But whatever you choose, carry these lessons with you. They'll take you farther than any badge or uniform ever could." The officer nodded, letting the words sink in. Back at the station, people noticed the change in him. He walked with more confidence, but also more humility. He handled difficult calls with calm judgment. When rookies struggled, he offered guidance instead of frustration. When tense situations arose, he was often the voice that brought everyone back to focus. He wasn't perfect. He still had moments of doubt, moments when stress tested his composure. But now he had the tools to manage them, and the understanding that growth never really stops. One evening, after a long shift, he sat alone in his patrol car. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft colors. He thought back to the night when he had crossed the line, when anger had taken over. When he had forgotten who he wanted to be, he thought about how far he had come since then. What he once saw as the worst moment of his career had become the beginning of something better, something that changed him for the rest of his life. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, letting the quiet settle around him. Then he opened them again, ready for whatever came next. Because now, he wasn't just an officer. He was a better human being, and that, he realized, mattered more than anything else.